But let's go back to ancient Babylon and try to discover what is at its very heart. Remember in Revelation 17, verse 5, there is something written on the forehead of this fallen church system. Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, a fallen church system whose doctrines would go to the world, a fallen church system that would have many daughter churches as well. Revelation reveals the past. It leads us back to ancient Babylon so we can understand something about this second angel's message. Babylon is falling, so we can flee Babylon, leave the intoxication of the wine of Babylon, and come to the truth of God's word. What does it mean, mystery, the Babylon the Great? Well, let's go back to ancient Babylon, see in this presentation if we can learn a little about ancient Babylon. Literal Babylon had fallen, spiritual Babylon rises, but we learn some great lessons. What are some of Babylon's falsehoods in ancient Babylon that we can then understand would be superimported into the Christian church today? The central issue here is believing or disbelieving God's word. That's the real central issue. In ancient Babylon, human opinion was exalted above God's word. Remember in Genesis 11, verse 19, we have the origin of Babylon. It says, therefore its name is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth. So right after the flood, human beings in disobedience to God, human beings in disbelief of God's word, human beings in defiance of God's word, built a temple that rose to heaven because they thought if there's another flood coming, we don't want to be destroyed. So this Tower of Babel was the very foundation of the city of Babylon. This Tower of Babel was a monument to humanism. It was a monument to human ideas. It was a monument to human teachings. It was a monument to human philosophy. And so they turned from God's promise of protection to a human plan to protect themselves. So in the last days of Earth's history, church and state unites. They say you cannot buy or sell unless you follow the beast power. Babylon, the woman with her false doctrine, unites with the state. But here, there are a group of people that say, we believe in the word of Christ. The word of Christ is predominant in our lives. We'll live by God's word. And we believe in the promise of his protection. We turn from human plans and ideas. You know, notice the first four letters of the word Babylon. What are they? B-A-B-Y. Baby. Why do you call baby a baby? You call a baby because it has what? Confused speech. So Babylon has confused values. When you think of Babylon, think of confusion. When religion becomes confused, truth becomes distorted. And human opinions are elevated above God's word. When that happens, it's nothing more than babbling or Babylon. So in Babylon, there's the distortion of truth. In Babylon, human opinion is exalted above God's word. When somebody says, well, I know that's what God's word teaches, but that's not what I think. I know what God's word teaches, but that's not what my pastor says. I know what God's word teaches, but that's not what my church teaches. When we go for human opinion, and look, let me take that a step further. When, in the name of scholarship even, and I thank God for godly scholars, but when in the name of scholarship, we superimpose our will upon the teachings of God's word, we become confused in our understanding. That creates more confusion than it does light. God speaks in his word. What is Babylon? When religion becomes confused, when truth becomes distorted, and human opinions are elevated above God's word. It is nothing more, my friend, than Babylon. Truth stands in stark contrast to error. And here, the wise man puts it this way. Proverbs chapter 23 and verse 23. And the wise man speaks to this generation, and his words come echoing and re-echoing down the centuries of time. Proverbs chapter 23, verse 23, he says, buy the truth and sell it not. Also wisdom and instruction and understanding. Buy the truth and sell it not. What is the fundamental problem with Babylon? Babylon has sold out truth for popularity. It's sold out truth for convenience. Its teachings have amalgamated the teachings of the paganism and brought them subtly into the church.